Hey guys, Hailey Lain, aka Key Black here, and I am extremely excited for today's episode because this is the official beginning of the Death T arc. And this chapter starts to do some of the most phenomenal pacing anticipation buildup that I have ever seen in my life. It starts out with this flashback to the cards with teeth. We get to see again the other Yugi administering the penalty game of the experience of death towards Kaiba after he lost the duel. As usual, the illustrations here are absolutely gorgeous, but what really got me was on the fourth page on the title page, you see the other Yugi's expression after he's administered this experience of death on Kaiba. Of course, Kaiba's expression is as horrified as you would expect, but the other Yugi has this sadistic, gleeful grin on his face. I'm a friggin' mess. I paused what I was doing while I was reading this again for recording this, and I went back to check the cards with teeth chapter, and I was like, oh, wait a second, he doesn't make that face in that chapter. What's going on? On the very next page, after we see that expression, Kaiba wakes up from a nightmare. So it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's his imagination / memory of it. But reading through it as one continuous piece, it is really jarring. Like, you actually kind of feel that boom as Kaiba wakes up with a start, you know? And he's panting in his bed. You see this light streaming in through the window, and it's like, okay, it's a huge contrast from the first 4 pages of this chapter. But the way that Kaiba is portrayed in this chapter and onwards, I have never seen in any other story that I have ever experienced. Certainly not when I first read this thing. That's what really caught me about this chapter, is that this Death T thing, there was no reference to it in the anime version that I watched growing up, and I hadn't seen season 0, so this was really my first exposure to it. And the Kaiba that's in Cards with Teeth, it's already very different from the Kaiba that I was familiar with from the English 4Kids anime. Even that, I was totally unprepared for the degree of terrifying, malicious obsession that I got to see for the first time in this version of Kaiba and throughout Death T. This chapter opens up with Kaiba kind of having this little monologue to himself about, alright, he's been having this recurring nightmare for weeks, but after today's project, he'll never have those nightmares again. And then abrupt switch, as soon as he comes out to greet Yugi and Jinochi, it's all smiles. I've got such a wonderful thing to show you, Yugi. I have just such a great dream of building this grand theme park for kids around the world to enjoy. Welcome everybody to the grand opening of Kaiba Land. Everything he says and every face he makes throughout basically solid 5 pages of this chapter is so off-putting, and it's just like, even Yugi's starting to be taken in by it, like, gee, did I misjudge you, Kaiba? And this weird tension starts to build of like, when's he gonna let the real Kaiba slip? Then this former Kaiba Corp employee shows up to accuse Kaiba of killing Gozaburo, the former owner of Kaiba Corporation, his own father. And my gut drops seeing this panel where the smile falls from Kaiba's face, and it doesn't come back for the rest of the chapter. I have to laugh at myself because I've always had this crush on the other Yugi, you know, scary, kind of a bad guy, good guy character, but that sadistic glee expression on the other Yugi in Kaiba's nightmare does not hold a candle to the expressions he starts to make in this chapter. It's not long before the pretense totally drops. Kaiba reveals that he's kidnapped Grandpa Muto on threat of "we'll kill Yugi if you don't comply." He's forcing him to duel him in Magic and Wizards in front of this huge audience. This incredible pressure from the audience is contrasting so intensely with what's actually going on with the characters. And that sadistic serial killer smile starts to finally creep back onto Kaiba's face tenfold. I could talk about how Takahashi masterfully paces out this duel so that, like, it's not really showing much of the duel, it's more focused on the characters. I could talk about how Yugi's reacting to the situation, how Grandpa's dealing with it, but in my opinion, the real star of the show is Kaiba, whose maniacal glee becomes more intense by the panel, until by the end he's revealed all 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons that he's acquired by forcing people into bankruptcy and suicide, before forcing Grandpa Muto through a virtual version of the experience of death that he was just having nightmares about, and basically rubbing Yugi's face in it. I had never seen any character, any villain act even remotely as terrifying as Kaiba becomes in this chapter. chapter. You know, it's that slow turn from the, oh, I kind of feel bad for him, like that's a pretty brutal punishment even though he's kind of a jerk, to, oh, that's a really calm reaction to such a horrifying nightmare, Kaiba. That's a really unnerving smile, Kaiba. Oh no. Any face that the other Yugi could have made in his, like, you know, gleeful punishment of any villain of the day, right, pales in comparison to the face that Kaiba makes at the end of this chapter when he announces that Yugi, if he wishes to set his grandfather free from that simulation, must endure the theme park of death, Death T. And then, of course, that face is immediately followed by Yugi gritting his teeth and looking like he might be just about to transform, like right here, right now, in front of all these people. And so I'm just sitting here going like, oh my god, the tension. But I think that's a pretty good place to cut off the episode for now. Guys, thank you so much for listening and for watching. I'll see you in the next one when we finally enter Death T1 Stardust Shootout in what is the biggest, grandest, scariest saga in Yu-Gi-Oh! So far. So thanks again, and I'll see you then.